What's better, the new Tarmac SL8 or the SL7? And what is it that makes the SL8 so polarizing? So polarizing that even some Tarmac SL7 owners are jumping onto the bandwagon to throw shade on the SL8. But maybe those SL7 owners are onto something. And look, as someone who has over 700 miles on the SL8 and almost 15,000 miles on the SL7, I feel like I've got a dog in the fight. In this SL7 versus SL8 video, we'll compare them on the following 5 points. Number 1, the build. Number 2, aesthetics. 3, ride quality. 4, handling characteristics. And 5, value. So feel free to skip ahead as you please, and I'll do like a wrap-up conclusion at the end. Just like the SL8 video that I posted last week, this isn't a sponsored video. No one sent me these bikes for review. I bought the frames at normal retail price, with the exception of the black-white warranty frame that I purchased late last year. That one was actually a local Craigslist find. And if you're following along here, I tend to buy frames and swap over parts from previous builds to cut down on cost. Second, if you're looking for in-depth tech specs, check out the Specialized website and a lot of the first look videos with the typical talking points you find everywhere. This review might be unique in that it's very isolated to just the frame. See, with the exception of the bar and stem, I transferred all of the components from my SL7 to the SL8. Each of these builds is a full SRAM red build with a 4835 crankset and a 1033 cassette. I prefer the look of the all black force crankset, and as far as I can tell, it performs identically to the red crankset. The SL8 has the new Revol Rapide cockpit in 120mm by 400mm. The SL7 had a 120mm SL7 stem with 400mm standard physique drop bars. I have 2 different wheel sets for these bikes, the NV45s with a set of 28mm Continental GP5000 STRs and NV23s with 30mm Vittoria Corsa Pros, both sealed with orange sealed endurance sealant. I have the Pro Stealth carbon saddle and a ceramic speed coated bottom bracket on both of these bikes. Both frames are a size 56. The SL8 is a Project Black edition. The SL7 is a black-white warranty frame. The complete SL8 build comes in at just under 15 pounds with the 2.3s, and the SL7 with the 2.3s would have been right around 16 pounds. To the untrained eye, these bikes look very, very similar. In fact, I've ridden in a handful of group rides on the SL8, and someone will ask me, when are you getting the new SL8? And I'll quickly reply, dude, I'm on it, check it out. Even when I brought home the SL8, I asked my wife if she would have ever noticed that I had bought a new bike. And her response was that she would have had no idea. So for all of you out there who are running what I call Operation Just Another Black Bike with your significant other, you might just be in luck. But look, let's cut to it. If we're strictly talking aesthetics, the SL7 is the better looking bike. The lines are cleaner, they're sharper, the head tube is more proportional, the fork blades are more slim. The SL7 just has a cleaner, more classic look all around. And while the SL8 received a ton of negative feedback with the first leaks, it looks much, much better in person, and the look is even growing on me, especially with the new Revol Rapide one-piece bar stem combo. I think that completes the look of the bike. But if I had to choose one just based on aesthetics, I choose the SL7. The original merger of the SL6 and the Venge to create the SL7 was welcomed by many, and I think that time has proven that it was the right call. This was a good marriage of 2 different bikes. They seem to have taken the exceptional handling of the SL6 and mixed it with the aerodynamics of the Venge. Just ask anyone who's ridden the SL7 for an extended period of time. It's a winning formula. Many of us wondered how they could improve upon the SL7. And I think even now that the SL8 has launched, many are still wondering if it is in fact an improvement. Here's my take, and let me bring in another car comparison. The SL7 is like a Porsche 911 Turbo S. It's incredibly fast, it's responsive, the handling is tight, and it wants to go and go and go. You're convinced that it's the best and it's all that you'll ever need. And then your friend pulls up in his 911 GT3 RS and tosses you the keys. And the moment you start moving, you realize that the suspension and steering is more firm and responsive. It's lighter and quicker off the line, and the handling is elevated to a level that you didn't know existed, and that is the SL8. The front end of the SL8 is noticeably more stiff, especially as you jump out of the saddle on climbs. Descending feels slightly faster, almost providing that sailing effect that was felt on the Venge. And the steering is incredibly precise. There's no understeer, there's no oversteer. In fact, I think the SL8 shores up one tiny gripe that I had with the SL7, and that is that it had just a hair of oversteer. The SL8 seems to have corrected that. You can't talk about handling without talking about ride quality, and here's where preference enters the equation. In the example of the 911 Turbo S versus the GT3 RS, the latter is going to have a suspension and handling that is noticeably more firm. Now, the translation to the SL8 is that the frame stiffness takes a little bit of time to get used to. The rear end, although it's supposed to be ethos, seems to bounce around a lot more than the SL7. Yes, it absorbs light road chatter well, but as soon as you encounter real bumps in the road, the SL8, like a 911 with firm suspension, jumps around a bit. It took me a few rides, and I'd say a few 100 miles to get used to. The SL7, on the other hand, feels planted and seems to better absorb rougher terrain. So if I had to give these a comparative score, the SL8 would get a 10 on handling and a 9 on ride quality, whereas the SL7 would get a 9 on handling and a 10 on ride quality. It's up to you to decide which is your priority. In a straight line, they both feel very fast. I know the SL8 is supposed to save 8 watts over the SL7. I'm also very aware that it's difficult to fill 8 watts in the real world, and that 50% of those watt savings seem to come from the new bar stem combo. At least that's what the white paper would suggest. I think you have to extrapolate a lot of those numbers that you find in the lab over great distances to really recognize the performance gains. And look, in the real world, both of these bikes are exceptionally fast. It's no secret that retailers are now discounting the SL7, making it a clear and simple value winner. And I think at the prices they're offering and the performance that the SL7 brings to the table, it's simply hard to beat. When it comes to value, I would encourage you to look beyond just the purchase price and consider the sales price when you go to sell the bike. See, buying the older model now might mean that you sell it for significantly less in a few years. You may find that you save money now, but lose more on the other end of the bike's life. Just something to consider. That being said, the value has always been with the pro and expert levels of frames and complete builds. You get the bulk of the performance benefits for a fraction of the price. Before I jump to any conclusions, do me a favor and drop me a comment below, and in a few words tell me, SL7 or SL8 and why. Data and numbers aside, just taking my experience of what it's been like to ride both of these bikes and really find out which bike suits me best, well, for me, the SL8 is the more exciting bike to ride. In many ways, I feel like it's a marriage of the SL7 and the Venge, a combo that I really like. Does it feel profoundly different from the SL7? No, it's incremental. But it does feel like everything has been worked on and fine-tuned to create an exceptional race-like performance. And that is what makes the SL8 so good. But for the majority of riders out there, the SL7 is probably the better bike. It's more well-rounded and it has a finesse about it that is simply unmatched. Add the value component and it's hard to beat the total package of the SL7. A lot of it boils down to personal preference. Do you want the 911 Turbo S and the performance that it offers, or do you want the ultra race-like performance of the GT3 RS? Both are great in their own way. Anyways, next week I head to Utah to participate in the Lotoja Classic, which is a 200-mile bike race that goes from Logan, Utah to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. This will be my 6th year in a row at that race. So we'll run through my bike setup, my equipment decisions as kind of like a part 1, and then in a part 2, we'll talk about what worked and what didn't over 200 miles. And yes, without a doubt, I will be riding the SL8, so I'll have a good chance to put it through its paces and see how it performs over 200 miles. So if you have any long ride specific questions about the SL8, drop them below and I'll do my best to answer them after the race. And I'm also stumped here. For this race, should I run the GP5000 STRs or should I run the Vittoria Corsa Pros? Drop me a comment below and let me know. Anyways, until next time.